Assalamualaikum and a very good day to everyone. Today, I'll be presenting a constitutional law case entitled Cik Omar Cik Su versus Public Prosecutor reported in 1988 to LAB2013. This case is a landmark decision by the Supreme Court of Malaysia as it discusses the constitutional position of Islam as the religion of the Federation and its relationship with the criminal law in Malaysia. Is very important because it examines whether Islamic law forms the basis of Malaysia's legal system and whether laws enacted by Parliament must conform to Islamic principles. In particular, the court was asked to determine the constitutionality of the mandatory death penalty imposed under the Dangerous Drug Act 1952. Alright. This case was heard by the Supreme Court of Malaysia, which known as Federal Court nowadays, and the judgment was delivered by Judge Tun Saleh Abbas, who was the Lord President at the time of law. Next, the parties involved in this case is the appellant, which is Cik Omar Cik Su, and also the respondent, which is the public prosecutor. Next, we will go through the legal issue in this case. The legal issue in this case is whether the mandatory death penalty imposed under Dangerous Drug Act 1952 is unconstitutional on the ground that it is inconsistent with Islamic law, having regard to Article 3, Clause 1 of the Federal Constitution. Next, we will focus on the facts of the case. The appellant in this case, which is Cik Omar Cik Su, was a Muslim who was charged with drug trafficking under the Dangerous Drug Act 1952. Under the provision of the Act, drug trafficking is classified as a serious criminal offence and carries a mandatory death penalty upon conviction. Following his conviction, the appellant was sentenced to death in accordance with the statutory punishment prescribed by the Act. Being dissatisfied with the sentence imposed, the appellant appealed against the decision and challenged the constitutionality of the law under which he was being punished. The appellant did not dispute the factual basis of the charge against him. Instead, his challenge focused on the legality and the constitutionality of the punishment imposed. During the appeal, counsel for the appellant advanced several arguments. Firstly, it was argued that the mandatory death penalty imposed under the Dangerous Drug Act 1952 was inconsistent with Islamic law. The appellant contended that as a Muslim, he ought to be governed by Islamic criminal law, particularly hudud and qisas, rather than by civil criminal law enacted by Parliament. Secondly, the appellant counsel relied strongly on the Article 3, Clause 1 of the Federal Constitution, which declares Islam as the religion of the Federation. It was submitted that this constitutional provision is not merely a symbol or a symbolic, but instead reflects the foundational role of Islam within the Malaysian legal system. According to the appellant, this requires all laws, including criminal laws, to be consistent with Islamic principles. Thirdly, counsel for the appellant argued that since the offence of drug trafficking and its corresponding punishment are not specifically provided for under Islamic criminal law, the imposition of the mandatory death penalty was unconstitutional. It was further submitted that the application of such punishment to a Muslim accused amounted to a violation of the constitutional status accorded to Islam under Article 3, Clause 1. On the basis of this submission, the appellant urged the court to declare the relevant provision of the Dangerous Drug Act 1952 as unconstitutional and to set aside the sentence of the death imposed on him. Next, The judgment of this case is the Supreme Court rejected the appellant's argument. The court held that the term Islam and Islamic religion in the Article 3 of the Federal Constitution refers only to matters relating to religious rituals and also ceremonies, and not to Islam as a comprehensive legal system governing all aspects of law. The court explained that this interpretation must be understood inside of Malaysian legal history. During the British colonial period, Islamic law could be confined to personal matters such as marriage, divorce, and also inheritance. As a result, Islamic law was not applied to criminal law or public law matters, which were instead governed by the laws introduced based on common law principles. Therefore, the court held that Article 3 cannot be relied upon to support the argument that laws imposing the death penalty, including for the drug trafficking, are unconstitutional. Accordingly, the Dangerous Drug Act 1952 remains valid and are constitutional. Next, for the last part of this presentation, I will continue with the significance of the case. This case is very significant and vital because it clarifies that the Federal Constitution is the supreme law of the land under the Article 4. It confirms that although Islam holds a special position as the religion of the Federation, Malaysia's legal system is based on the constitutional supremacy rather than just religious supremacy. Lastly, for the conclusion, the Supreme Court dismissed the appeal and upheld that the validity of the mandatory death penalty under the Dangerous Drug Act 1952 of this case, which is Omar versus Public Prosecutor, remains as important authority in understanding the constitutional position of Islam and the nature of Malaysia's legal system. That's all from me. Thank you for watching and listening.